Karen Weston slammed her fist on the table, her face twisted in rage. You can't do this. This is my neighborhood, and I won't let you ruin it. Across from her, Samantha Murphy sat calmly, unfazed by the outburst. She had spent weeks meticulously planning this moment, and she wasn't about to let Karen's entitled tantrum derail her. I'm afraid I can, Samantha replied, her voice level. I've purchased a controlling interest in the HOA. This neighborhood is now under my management. Karen's eyes widened in shock. What? That's impossible. You can't just waltz in here and take over. Samantha leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing on her lips. Oh, I can. And I have. The paperwork is all in order. I'm the new president of the HOA, effective immediately. The color drained from Karen's face as the reality of the situation sank in. For years, she had ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist, using the HOA to bully her neighbors and enforce her twisted vision of the perfect community. Now, all of that power was slipping through her fingers. You can't do this to me, Karen cried, her voice shrill. I won't let you. Samantha's expression hardened. I'm afraid you don't have a choice. The decision has been made, and it's final. Karen jumped to her feet, her chair clattering to the floor behind her. This isn't over, Samantha. I'll fight you every step of the way. You'll regret the day you crossed me. With that, she stormed out of the room, the door slamming behind her. Samantha watched her go, a sense of triumph swelling within her. For years, she had borne the brunt of Karen's tyrannical rule, watching helplessly as her neighbor used the HOA to terrorize the community. But no more. She had spent months carefully orchestrating this takeover, using her financial resources and legal expertise to outmaneuver Karen at every turn. And now, she held all the cards. As Samantha stood and gathered her documents, she couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was just the beginning. With the HOA under her control, she had the power to transform the neighborhood, to undo the damage that Karen had inflicted over the years. But she knew that the battle was far from over. Karen was a formidable adversary, and she would stop at nothing to regain her lost power. Samantha would have to be vigilant, to stay one step ahead of her neighbor at all times. As she made her way out of the building, Samantha couldn't help but smile. The days of Karen's reign of terror were over. Now, it was time for a new era to begin. The slamming of the door echoed through the empty hallway as Karen stormed out of the meeting room, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Samantha had somehow managed to wrest control of the HOA right out from under her. For years, Karen had lorded over the neighborhood with an iron fist, using the HOA as her personal fiefdom to enforce her vision of the perfect community. She had relished the power it gave her, the way she could bend her neighbors to her will with a few well-placed threats or fines. But now, all of that was gone. Samantha had outmaneuvered her, and Karen was seething with rage. She couldn't let this stand. She had to find a way to take back control, to regain her rightful place as the undisputed ruler of the HOA. As she hurried to her car, Karen's mind was already whirring, hatching a plan. She knew Samantha was no pushover. The woman had clearly put in a lot of work to orchestrate this takeover. But Karen was determined to show her just who was boss. Once she was behind the wheel, Karen pulled out her phone and began dialing. She needed to call in some favors, to rally her allies and mount a counteroffensive. She wouldn't go down without a fight, not when so much was at stake. As the phone rang, Karen gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white. She had to win this battle, no matter what it took. Her reputation, her sense of control, her very way of life. It was all on the line. Finally, the call connected, and Karen launched into a frantic explanation of the situation. You won't believe what's happened, she said, her voice laced with urgency. That bitch Samantha has taken over the HOA. On the other end of the line, Karen's ally listened intently, their own sense of outrage growing. They knew how important the HOA was to Karen, how much it meant to her to be in charge, and they were more than willing to help her take it back. "Don't worry, Karen," the ally said, their voice low and reassuring. "We'll figure this out. We're not going to let Samantha get away with this." Karen felt a surge of relief at those words. She knew she could count on her allies to have her back. Together, they would find a way to take down Samantha and reclaim the HOA. As she hung up the phone, Karen felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would not be defeated, not by Samantha or anyone else. This was her neighborhood, her domain, and she would do whatever it took to keep it that way. With a determined expression on her face, Karen started her car and pulled out of the parking lot, already planning her next move. Samantha sat at her desk, reviewing the stack of paperwork that now defined her role as the new president of the HOA. She couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as she pored over the documents. Finally, she had the power to make real change in the neighborhood. For years, she had watched helplessly as Karen abused her position, using the HOA to terrorize her neighbors and enforce her own narrow-minded vision. Now, the tables had turned, and Samantha was in control. But as she read through the bylaws and regulations, Samantha couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. She knew that Karen wouldn't go down without a fight, and she couldn't underestimate the lengths her neighbor might go to in order to regain her lost power. Samantha sighed and set the papers aside, leaning back in her chair. She had to be careful, to tread carefully, and not let her guard down. Karen was a formidable opponent, and Samantha knew that she would need to be strategic in her approach. As she contemplated her next move, Samantha's phone suddenly buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced down at the screen and felt her stomach twist with dread. It was Karen. Steeling herself, Samantha answered the call. "Hello, Karen." "Samantha." Karen's voice was icy cold. "I want to make one thing very clear. This isn't over. I'm not going to let you waltz in here and take over my neighborhood." Samantha could hear the barely contained rage in Karen's voice, and she knew that she was in for a fight. "I'm afraid it is over, Karen. The HOA is under my control now, and there's nothing you can do about it." "We'll see about that," Karen hissed. "I have allies, Samantha. People who are willing to do whatever it takes to stop you. You may have won this round, but the war is just beginning." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine at the threat in Karen's words. She knew that her neighbor was capable of anything, and she couldn't afford to underestimate her. "I'm not interested in a war, Karen," Samantha replied, her voice steady. "All I want is to make this neighborhood a better place for everyone. If you're willing to work with me, I'm open to that. But if you insist on fighting me, then I'll have no choice but to respond in kind." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Samantha could almost feel the tension crackling in the air. Finally, Karen spoke again, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Samantha. Mark my words, I'll make your life a living hell. This isn't over, not by a long shot." With that, the line went dead, and Samantha was left staring at her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that she had to be prepared for whatever Karen had in store, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. This was going to be a battle of wills, and Samantha was determined to come out on top. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity for Samantha as she settled into her new role as the HOA president. She had wasted no time in implementing her vision for the neighborhood, working tirelessly to undo the damage that Karen's reign of terror had caused. First on her list was addressing the long-standing issues that had plagued the community for years. She began by tackling overgrown landscaping and crumbling infrastructure, allocating funds for much-needed repairs and improvements. Neighbors who had once been too afraid of Karen's wrath to speak up now eagerly approached Samantha with their concerns, grateful for her willingness to listen and take action. As word of Samantha's initiatives spread through the neighborhood, a palpable sense of optimism began to take hold. Residents who had once lived in fear of the HOA now saw it as a force for positive change, and they rallied behind Samantha's leadership. But Karen was not about to let her power slip away without a fight. Samantha had barely settled into her new office when her phone began to ring with complaints and threats from her former nemesis. "You're destroying everything I've built," Karen would scream, her voice dripping with venom. "How dare you undo all of my hard work?" Samantha would listen patiently, refusing to be drawn into Karen's histrionics. She knew that her neighbor was desperate, clinging to the vestiges of control that she had once wielded with an iron fist. "The changes I'm making are for the good of the entire community, Karen," Samantha would reply, her tone calm and measured. "I'm not interested in defending myself to you. If you have any legitimate concerns, I'm happy to address them. But if you continue to harass me, I'll have no choice but to take legal action." The threats and demands only intensified in the days that followed, as Karen enlisted her network of allies to try and undermine Samantha's authority. Suddenly, the neighborhood was embroiled in a bitter feud, with neighbors taking sides and tensions running high. But Samantha refused to be deterred. She continued to push forward with her plans, undaunted by Karen's attempts to sabotage her efforts. She knew that she had the support of the majority of the community, and she was determined to see her vision through to the end. As the weeks passed, the conflict between Samantha and Karen only seemed to escalate. Neighbors began to take sides, some rallying behind Samantha's vision for a better future, while others clung to Karen's outdated and oppressive rule. Samantha could feel the tension building, a potential flashpoint that could erupt at any moment. She knew that she had to be vigilant, to stay one step ahead of Karen's machinations. The fate of the entire neighborhood hung in the balance, and Samantha was determined to emerge victorious. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable as the war between Samantha and Karen raged on. Neighbors were taking sides, with some firmly in Samantha's camp and others stubbornly loyal to Karen. Samantha had worked tirelessly to implement her vision for the community, pouring her heart and soul into improving the neighborhood's infrastructure, landscaping, and overall livability. She had listened to the concerns of her neighbors and addressed them with compassion and diligence, winning over the trust and support of a growing number of residents. But Karen was not about to go down without a fight. She had rallied her allies, using every trick in the book to undermine Samantha's authority and derail her initiatives. From filing frivolous complaints to orchestrating smear campaigns, Karen was pulling out all the stops in her quest to regain control of the HOA. Samantha found herself constantly on the defensive, fending off Karen's relentless attacks. She knew that she couldn't afford to let her guard down, even for a moment, lest her neighbors seize the opportunity to strike. One day, as Samantha was reviewing the latest round of complaints from Karen, her phone suddenly rang. It was her lawyer, his voice tinged with urgency. "Samantha, we've got a problem," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Karen has filed a lawsuit against you, alleging that you're mismanaging the HOA funds and abusing your power." Samantha felt her stomach drop. Samantha stood before the gathered crowd of concerned neighbors, her expression determined. The air was thick with tension as she addressed the group, outlining the latest development in the ongoing feud with Karen. "Karen has filed a lawsuit against me, alleging that I'm mismanaging the HOA funds and abusing my power," Samantha announced, her voice steady. "But I want to assure you all that this is a complete fabrication. She is simply trying to undermine my authority and regain control of the HOA." A murmur of discontent rippled through the crowd, and Samantha could see the anger and frustration on the faces of her neighbors. They had all witnessed firsthand the damage that Karen's reign of terror had done to the community, and they were not about to let her undo the progress that Samantha had made. "We can't let Karen win this fight," Samantha continued, her tone resolute. "This is not just about me. It's about the future of our neighborhood. We've come too far to let her drag us back into the darkness." The crowd erupted into applause, and Samantha felt a surge of pride. She knew that she had the support of the majority of the community, and that was a powerful weapon in the battle against Karen. My lawyer and I are working tirelessly to gather the evidence we need to refute Karen's claims, Samantha explained. But we're going to need your help. We need you all to share your stories, to show the court the true impact that Karen's actions have had on this community. The neighbors nodded, their faces set with determination. They were ready to fight, to do whatever it took to protect the progress that Samantha had made. As the meeting drew to a close, Samantha found herself surrounded by a group of her most ardent supporters. They discussed strategy, sharing ideas, and offering their full-throated support. "We're with you, Samantha," one of the neighbors, a retired schoolteacher named Margaret, said, her eyes shining with conviction. "We won't let Karen take this neighborhood back." Samantha felt a surge of gratitude, her heart swelling with emotion. She knew that she couldn't win this battle alone, and the knowledge that she had the backing of her community was a powerful source of strength. As the neighbors dispersed, Samantha turned to her lawyer, who had been observing the proceedings with a thoughtful expression. "Well, I think that went about as well as we could have hoped," the lawyer said, offering Samantha a wry smile. "Now let's get to work on building our case. We've got a fight on our hands, but I believe we can win this." Samantha nodded, her jaw set with determination. She was ready to do whatever it took to protect the progress she had made and ensure that the future of the neighborhood remained in the hands of the community, not the whims of a tyrant like Karen. This was a fight she was determined to win, no matter the cost. The courtroom was a charged atmosphere as Samantha and her legal team took their seats, facing off against Karen and her formidable array of attorneys. The stakes had never been higher, and both sides were prepared to fight tooth and nail for the future of the neighborhood. Samantha could feel the weight of her neighbors' expectations resting squarely on her shoulders as the proceedings began. She knew that they were depending on her to vindicate their trust and defeat Karen's baseless accusations. As the arguments unfolded, Samantha listened intently, her mind racing as she took in the details of Karen's case. The claims of financial mismanagement and abuse of power were entirely fabricated, Samantha knew, but she also understood that Karen's team was skilled in the art of obfuscation and misdirection. Samantha's lawyer, on the other hand, was a seasoned veteran, well-versed in navigating the complexities of HOA law. One by one, he methodically dismantled Karen's arguments, presenting a mountain of evidence that clearly demonstrated Samantha's responsible and transparent management of the association's finances. As the courtroom drama unfolded, Samantha couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. She had always known that she was in the right, but to see it play out so convincingly in the eyes of the judge was a powerful validation of her efforts. But Karen was not about to go down without a fight. As Samantha's lawyer delivered his closing arguments, the embattled former HOA president rose to her feet, her face a mask of fury. "This is a travesty of justice," Karen shouted, her voice shrill and trembling. "Samantha is lying through her teeth, and you're all just letting her get away with it." The judge banged his gavel, calling for order in the courtroom. "Ms. Weston, if you cannot conduct yourself in a civilized manner, I will have you removed from these proceedings." Karen glared at the judge, her eyes narrowed to slits. "This isn't over, Samantha," she hissed, her words dripping with venom. "I'll make sure you regret the day you ever set foot in this neighborhood." With that, she stormed out of the courtroom, leaving an uneasy silence in her wake. Samantha watched her go, a sense of relief washing over her. She had weathered the storm, and the victory was hers. As the judge deliberated, Samantha couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had fought hard, and she had won, not just for herself, but for the entire community. The future of the neighborhood was now firmly in her hands, and she was determined to use that power to continue the transformation she had already set in motion. When the judge finally delivered his ruling, the verdict was resounding. Samantha had been completely exonerated, and Karen's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The courtroom erupted in cheers, and Samantha felt a surge of triumph. The tyrant had been vanquished, and the community was finally free. The dust had finally settled, and Samantha stood at the helm of the HOA, her victory complete. As she surveyed the transformed neighborhood, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. Gone were the days of Karen's tyrannical reign, replaced by a community that was thriving and united. The landscaping had been meticulously maintained, the infrastructure had been repaired, and the residents were engaged and empowered. Samantha had worked tirelessly to undo the damage that Karen had inflicted over the years, and the results were clear for all to see. Neighbors who had once lived in fear of the HOA had now embraced it as a force for positive change, eager to contribute their time and energy to the betterment of the community. But Samantha knew that the work was far from over. While she had emerged victorious in the battle against Karen, she understood that there were still challenges ahead. The neighborhood was still healing from the scars of the past, and it would take time and patience to fully mend the rifts that had been created. As she walked through the streets, greeting her neighbors with a warm smile, Samantha couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. It had been a grueling and often demoralizing fight, but she had never wavered in her determination to see it through. And now, as she looked around at the thriving community that surrounded her, Samantha knew that it had all been worth it. The sacrifices she had made, the risks she had taken, they had all paid off, and she was filled with a deep sense of satisfaction. But even as she basked in the glow of her triumph, Samantha couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern. She knew that Karen was still out there, nursing her wounds and plotting her revenge. The former HOA president had been a formidable adversary, and Samantha couldn't afford to let her guard down. So she remained vigilant, ready to face whatever challenges might arise. She had proven herself to be a force to be reckoned with, and she was determined to protect the community that she had fought so hard to save. As the sun set on another day, Samantha found herself surrounded by her grateful neighbors, their faces alight with excitement and optimism. They had weathered the storm, and they were ready to embrace a brighter future, one that Samantha was proud to be a part of. In the end, the battle for control of the HOA had been a grueling and emotional journey, but Samantha had emerged victorious. She had proven that she was more than just a match for Karen's brand of entitlement and abuse, and she had shown the entire community that they had the power to shape their own destiny. And as she looked around at the thriving, vibrant neighborhood that she had helped to create, Samantha knew that she had made a difference, not just for herself, but for everyone who called this place home.